All right, I think it seems like that was all of the questions. So I'll go ahead here and start Module 2, which is going to be recipes, trends, and data logging. So for recipes, I'm pretty much going to use this example project because it takes way too long to set up. To get to recipes, it's down here, same thing almost as our other ones. If we double click on recipes, we can see our types of recipes. And if I right click on recipes, then we can create a new type. So just to click on one of the types that we have created here already, and to explain exactly what a recipe type is, what an element is, and what a set is. A recipe would be something like a wooden box here, for example, or an iron box. It's anything that we can have different types of and different, well, not to use the same word, but elements or different attributes. And really the best way to explain this is with an example. So the recipe I'm looking at here is an iron box. And we have 3 elements that are present in all boxes: the length, the width, and the height. So these things decide the size of the box. And we can have different sets that are predefined values for those elements to have. So box set 1 is our first type of iron box with length 1, width 4, height 6. Box set 2 is our second set of iron box, which is length 7, width 5. So this is a way that we can kind of record all of these this data, and I'll show how that we can cycle through it as in our actual project. So obviously we can add more here. I could add a new set or a new element if I wanted to. Our elements are looking for a tag. Usually it's a PLC tag. You don't have to use one, but usually you would be using one. And this tag is going to be linked with that element. So if you notice, when I right-clicked on recipes, I was able to add a new recipe, export the recipe, which just goes into a CSV file. We can import that CSV file in this way into runtime, or we can also add them, or in runtime. I meant to say in Studio in this case. So moving back to the project, we have some recipes set up already. And an important widget that you might use is this one here, the recipes widget, which is in a similar place to the alarms widget. So that's just this widget here. You can see it was changed a little bit in this example project because you can customize the buttons if you want to. So to show how this works, I'll just go ahead and demo the simulation and then kind of go through these. So recipe, this is the recipe that we're really looking at here. Iron is what I was looking at before. So we're looking at iron set 1, which was 146, and I can change it to iron set 2, which was 725. We can download them, which is just going to store them into certain registers or tags that are part of JMobile runtime. So I can have a set downloaded and then go and look at a different set if I want to. Upload would just move them the other way, so it would take my downloaded set and upload them into whatever my current selected set is. Dump recipes is how we store them into the CSV file. Restore recipes, this is how we get recipes from a CSV file and put that data back into our recipe tags in JMobile. And reset is just going to put these back to the values we defined in JMobile. We can also add a set or delete a set during runtime here. So you see that these numbers here are tags that changed, obviously. And because those tags are set to be the current current recipe, current selected set values. So that's really one of the things that I think is important to show here. So if I double click on this tag, I can see where it's coming from, and I'll just minimize this real quick. So usually when we have the tag Explorer here, we're selected to tag, and this is how we would see all these tags in our project. During the basic training, I showed this one, system, how we got the system variables. But recipe here is what we're interested here, obviously. And this is how we can select which values for associated with our recipes are being displayed. So if we want that value to never change, if I just wanted to get wooden box set 0, element 0, or element whatever, then this is how I would find it. I would just select the recipe that I'm interested in, the set that I'm interested in, the element that I'm interested in. But in most cases, you're going to want to have something that changes, like the example project. So for that, we have current recipe. So we have a current recipe tag here as well. Mine started off as a 0, and that's whenever it was showing the wooden box. When it changed to 1, it started showing the iron box. So we have current recipe, which is similar to our recipe number up here, 0, 1. It's just changing. And within that current recipe, we have current set, basically. So it's listing all of my sets here, or all of my possible sets, but down at the bottom, we have current selected set. So this is exactly similar to set 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's just changing. And within that current set that is changing, we have our elements. So if we flip through these real quick, we see that this is current selected set. Maybe it's easier to look at without clicking on it. Current recipe, current selected set, recipe, set 0, set 1, or current selected set, element 0, element 1, element 2. And if we look at this recipe selector widget here, we can see that when I changed the recipe, it actually changed the current recipe tag. Same thing here, it changed the current recipe set tag. So if you wanted to not use this and kind of make your own recipe widget, even if it's just a numeric field, you could actually just put your numeric field in and change the current recipe tag or the current selected set tag, and you could kind of make your own widget. But that's really what this one is doing. It's just an easier way. And if you don't like the buttons here, obviously you can just get rid of them. So you can kind of customize this the way that you want. Just to play with this again a little bit more. See, if I click on the question mark here, it's really just explaining this. The recipes project is probably one of the most useful ones, not only because this stuff takes a long time to set up, but because this is gives very thorough explanations, more or less kind of what we just went through. Okay, so I'm going to go on to trends next, which also I'm going to use the example project for. Trends and data logging I have grouped here together because JMobile kind of considers them to be part of the same thing. So we do have a trend widget, and we have another type of trend widget on the left here. And it's important to understand the difference. So I'm actually going to make a trend at the beginning here without using this trend widget here so that we can show what the difference is. So in my project here that I've been playing with, within Basic, we have trends and graphs. and I'm just going to add this real-time trend. So my trend widget that I just got here is really just a visualization of a tag, or up to 5 tags, or actually 10 in the new version of JMobile. But for most people, it's going to say 5 here. When we get 2.8, it'll be 10, which is great. So I have my one curve here. Maybe I'll make it 2 just so we can see more get added. And if I either expand all of these or just expand curve 1, I can see that I can decide a tag for curve 1. I'm just going to select short 1. And we can change other things like the button, the min, and the max. But basically what this is going to do is it's just going to display the value of short 1. So if I add a numeric field that I can use with short 1, and go ahead and simulate this. So my green one is the tag that, or the trend that I didn't add anything to. Blue one is the one that's changing here. So we can see that really all this is doing is it's just visualizing our tags. It's hard to show in simulator, but we do support the multi-gesturing actions on our trends on these 700 series panels. So if I click and drag, which is basically what I'm doing here, we can easily traverse the trend. If I did like a pinch action, I could zoom in and zoom out to make things appear bigger and smaller and get a better view. So this is just how we set up a basic visualization of a trend. And really that's what's going on in this one here. So if we simulate, and if I click on this, it's just showing us the same thing. It does not refer to any saved data in a buffer. And that's really the important distinction between the trend I just made and the trend I'm going to make next. The trend widget is just a viewer. It's just a visualization. And the other trend selection on the left side that I'm about to go into is how we can actually store this trend data into a trend buffer. So before I go back to over there, I'm just going to show these buttons here real quick. In the action list, we have a lot of trend actions, which means you can create buttons to traverse the trend if you want to. This is all a little bit outdated since now we have the gesturing actions. Before we had that, we just had these. These are what most other HMI software use just to traverse the trend. I think this way is a little bit better, but if you prefer to have the buttons, you can still make them. This is just showing the trend cursor, which most people don't use, but it would just put a cursor somewhere. And this is showing our tags that we're actually displaying on the trend. And lastly, we can decide the time range. So historical trend is doing something similar. We can just see almost the exact same thing. Almost the same thing as a real-time trend, just historical. So to show the difference between just this visualization of a trend and trends over here, which is really more of a trend buffer, I'm going to click on trend 1, and we can see that we have the ability to decide things like sampling time and storing our trend. So really this is why I've grouped trends and data logging together, because they're more or less the same thing here. The last one is actually called data logging. And what this is doing is we have a couple tags here, data 1, data 2, data 3. And we've set up all of the tags that we want to be logging. We've selected the sample time. This is 1 per second. What this means is that the number of samples that we put here is the number of samples that will be counted per 1 second. The maximum depends on the protocol, but it's always at least 100. So let's just say this was a 100. That would mean we would be collecting 100 samples of each of these tags per second. And those samples would be stored into a CSV file. We can make it so that it backs up automatically whenever the trend buffer fills up. It stores into a CSV. It can go into whatever location we want it to go to here. We can back it up automatically if we want to. And this number here is the number of samples. So this is the number of samples that the trend buffer is able to accommodate before it fills up and dumps them into the CSV. So here it's 40,000. It could be a lot more than that if we wanted to. It's just a good way to kind of calculate how big your CSV files would be. If we're doing 100 per second, then you can figure out how long it'll take for that buffer to fill up. And really, that's the same thing that's happening here. In this example, there's just a different trend for each of the numbers here, a different data logger, I should say, because really that's what this is. And then the last one was for the scatter diagram, which I didn't really look at, but it's using the same tags. So we had a button here, export. This is the data logger export to USB memory. There's an event for dump trend. So what dump trend does is it stores the CSV file, which could be a binary file as well, into whatever location we want. By default, it's going to give the file this name that looks weird. These are macros for year, month, day, hour, minute. This is usually how you would want it to be named, because not only does it timestamp them, but also it makes it so their names are all different. If you just gave it a standard name like trenddump.csv, it's just going to keep overwriting the same file, and you'll only actually have one file, which probably isn't good. Export to hard disk. This is basically doing the same thing. It's just changed the folder path to an FTP location instead of USB or internal memory. So that's kind of a quick view of there's 3 topics, but really just 2. I see a lot of questions coming in here. Looks like most of them have been answered already.
There were a couple of questions about recipes and exporting recipes, doing some editing, and then what would be the way to modify the recipes and re-import them into JMobile. The fact that it's a CSV file is a little bit challenging. It can be opened in Excel. The key is to, if you save it as a CSV, Excel kind of modifies the file. But if there's an option in Excel to save as a CSV in UTF format, which is a kind of Unicode, and in that case, that file is preserved as it was and can be used as an import to bring in edited recipe.
Yeah, and also, oh, go ahead.
There's another question about what would be the best way or best method to control the recipe using JavaScript. If you want to control the recipe functionality of a project outside of using the HMI itself, you can do that from the PLC, but you have to use JavaScript. And it is actually documented in the help of JMobile, where all the different functions, select recipe set, execute a download, upload, all those JavaScript methods are explained in the help file.
Do you remember what that page is called? Probably under recipes.
It's all in the JavaScript actually, where there are. It could be in the recipes too, but if you do JavaScript, I think that go to right below ending or handling read-write file JavaScript. About 5 down, yeah. The one up above, couple up, right below that.
This one?
The one, no, right below, yeah, JavaScript, this one. Okay, you can see all the different, there are some system events, for example. I think it might be on the, if you double click to system event or events. No, I don't think it's there. Well, let's see, scroll down. No. Just go back. There's a large section that talks about recipe control. Maybe it's project, since it's at the recipes are the project level. Yeah, I think it's probably here. Keep on scrolling down. Here it is, set recipe item, download recipes. So you have examples right there of the scripting that would be required. And obviously we can execute the script by either using a variable and using onDataUpdate, or you could also use the scheduler. You could use even a data transfer and have a condition. So based on that condition, the data transfer could trigger a variable, and on the update of that variable, then we can execute the JavaScript.
Okay, thanks. Looks like those are the questions. That module was kind of quick. I think I'm going to do multi-language as well as part of Module 4, if we have time.
I mean, I think we see questions we get related to recipes, and obviously we have all the widgets, all the control from the HMI, which is kind of the intent of recipes, where the operator can select recipes and recipe sets and upload, download. We probably could add to the example project showing what can be done if the recipes have to be controlled externally, where we can show the use of the script and how it could be triggered. Obviously, in the case of recipes, we need to select, we can have multiple recipes in a project. So the first thing is to select the recipe. The second thing is to select the recipe set. And then the next is to select what kind of action do we need to take. So that's why it gets a little bit complicated coming from the PLC, because all those events have to happen one after the other and have to be triggered correctly. Yeah, one of the question was with IIoT and things like RFID tags. people want to control the recipes either remotely or via after a scan of a badge. So, again, there is a need, or, some people might want to do the recipe control not from DHMI but remotely. So again, adding that aspect to the example project probably would be a good way for everyone to understand what it would take in order to do that. The easiest way obviously would be to write directly to those recipes that Matt was showing, the recipe tags. However, they are not available, for example, in data transfer jobs. We don't have access to those recipe tags in the data transfer. Otherwise, we can easily do that with a PLC, or remotely we can write to a tag, and then that tag would trigger a transfer to select the recipe, select the set, and execute a download. But we'll work on adding to the example project.